Welcome back, everybody. The next speaker I have for you is very exciting. You may have recently seen him on Ancient Aliens, on the History Channel, which he was a consulting producer for. He works very closely with Eric von Däniken, one of the oldest, longest, and most famous proponents of the ancient astronaut theory. He's the chairman for the Center for Ancient Astronaut Research. That is part of one of the projects Eric von Däniken does, and he's the publisher of the legendary Times magazine. I'm proud to introduce Giorgio Tsoukalos.
How you doing, everyone? Everyone good? This is one sweet setup, huh? Yes? Hello. How are you today?
Thank you for sending me lovely info. I was also studying with Eric von Däniken.
Really?
My colleague.
Fantastic. I appreciate that very much. So, wow, what a great turn up for a Saturday. Pretty awesome. I just stepped off the plane from Phoenix, Arizona, where I filmed my third episode of UFO Hunters in front of some petroglyphs. And the show will have a very fast turnaround. So 3 weeks from now, it'll air on the History Channel, Wednesday night, 8 p.m. So please tune in. All right, without further ado, we have a lot of slides to go through. So let's just start. Oh, and welcome to everyone watching worldwide on the web. It's pretty awesome that Jason Martell has set this up, and with such sweet technology that, you know, it actually works, which is great. So, whoa.
Sometimes the mic works a little too well.
You can still hear me though, right? So, all right. So, let me just, okay. Let's do it the manual way. There we go. All right. Eventually, mankind will venture into outer space because we are a species of explorers. So right now, the ISS is being built. Eventually, the space shuttle will get improved. Eventually, we will go back to the moon. This is actually a concept of what the next moon rocket will look like. And here's a comparison with the current space shuttle, and all the way to the right is the moon rocket that we'll use in about 5 years, and to the left is the Saturn V. Saturn V, which went to the moon back in 1969. And as with all things, we'll start out really, really small, set up a couple of, components up there, and start mining and so on and so forth. But then, as time progresses, our base will grow bigger and bigger and more sophisticated. This looks like almost like the Death Star in Star Wars. So, I mean, obviously, these are all concepts and ideas. This is not, a concise vision of the future, but this is something what might occur. So then, after we've built bases on the moon, the next logical step will be to visit Mars. And we will do this with more sophisticated ion-propelled spaceships. We'll start small once again, and then expand our bases on Mars. And then we are truly visiting the final frontier, deep space. We will go out there. I'm not saying it's in 20 years. I'm not even saying it's 100 years. It might be in 500 years. And that's just the reality of the level of technology that we have today. But when we arrive, oh, by the way, in order to get there, the critics always say, oh, the distances between the stars are too big. So what will happen is that we'll use something like a generation Starship. And that actually has been conceptualized already in the 60s by NASA. So this is not some, people talking out of their behinds. I mean, this is really something that has been mathematically constructed and proven that when you have a generation space, that the distances between the stars are big. And with our current technology, we really can't get can't get far. So what will happen is that not the same crew that will go out there will actually return. It'll be 4 or 5 generations after, so you're basically procreating on board of the spaceship. And in order for this to happen, the spaceship would have to have artificial gravity. And one way of creating artificial gravity in outer space is if you have a round wheel like this that's, rotating on its own axis, and thus you create artificial gravity. So it's basically like living, in this big gigantic wheel. And on the inside, it would look something like this. Again, this is a concept, this is an idea. The first ones will be much, much smaller than this, but this is approximately what this will look like, and it is all, possible to do this because if you have a wheel that's rotating its own axis, all the water, everything will be pushed out against the walls. So thus, it is possible to for you to walk around, not floating in anti-gravity and all this. So eventually, we will reach a planet, and that planet might host intelligent life. But technologically speaking, that life is not there yet. As in, they're intelligent, or pretty much there. However, technologically speaking, they're still primitive. So they might still, use flint to make fire, and who knows, maybe they're not even there yet to make fire. So what will we do? Will we just stand back and watch and say, no, we'll have to keep something what Star Trek refers to as a prime directive? I say, no way. Our egos are too big for us to just stand back and say, oh yeah, let them just toil around. What we will do is we will help them a little bit to push them sort of in a technological direction, teaching them about mathematics, teaching about engineering, about architecture, agriculture, all these different things. And eventually, we will become the gods that have visited their planet thousands of years in their past. And so, this is the basic premise of the ancient astronaut theory. If something like this, that we will do in the future, why can't it be that this has happened here on Earth 16, 17, 18, 25,000 years ago? And the truth of the matter is that it has, because here we have a picture of a helicopter landing on a South Island, an island in the South Pacific. And the natives, and this happened in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, where the natives, when the Second World War was going on, and all the subsequent wars in that region, the soldiers arrived in their planes, and the natives, for the very first time, had contact with, quote-unquote, an extraterrestrial society. Now, by all means, they are not dumb people, they are not stupid. It's their technological frame of reference is totally different than what we're used to. So what happened is that if you, by the way, Eric, may I borrow your laser pointer, please?
Yes.
That'll be really sweet. How are we doing here? Yes, everything is great now. I appreciate that you're 138. That's fantastic. Sweet. Okay, great. Hey, thank you very much. Okay, now, see, when the seaplane landed, they didn't know that it was a plane, but it was a mythical bird. And they described it in their traditions that it's a mythical bird. And mind you, this is all happening, at the beginning of the 20th century. Now, every night, the natives paddled out to the boat and this thing right here, that's a pig. So they sacrificed a pig to placate the mythical bird so it wouldn't make so much noise, because with the noise, that means the plane, or the mythical bird, I'm sorry, is angry. So they sacrificed the goat, the pig right there. So, right there, this is what's called a cargo cult. After the Second World War ended, the The Americans went back home in their planes and with their boats and all this, and 10, 20 years later, ethnologists went back to the island of Bebak, this one is, and the ethnologists were absolutely astonished because what had developed is this, that people rebuilt planes made of straw, and every night they re-performed these quote-unquote rituals for these mythical birds to take off and to land, for the gods to arrive or to return. Now what we have here in ethnological terms is known as a cargo cult. And cargo cult is the basic premise of the whole ancient astronaut theory. And it basically says, if this was possible in the early 20th century, then why, on our planet, why couldn't this have happened, 2, 3, 4, 10,000 years ago? And what I'm about to show you tells us that yes, it absolutely did happen. For example, India, treasure trove of ancient astronaut stuff. Up here in this painting, you have these gods flying around in what's called a Vimana or Vimanas, and you have thousands of year-old texts, like the Vimanika Shastra, that anyone can go and read. It's not anything that, was given to the person from a higher being or from a higher plane or was channeled or anything like this. No, it was written down thousands of years ago as it happened in physical form. And this is a reconstruction of one of these Vimanas, but it had, these propellers inside, and, we have to remind ourselves that those things, in most of the cases, were not high-speed devices, especially the Vimanas, because many of them were literally just dirigibles. Because there is one theory that says that some of these space travelers essentially crash-landed on our planet. And this is basically what happened. So they had to live out their lives on this planet, and instead of keeping to themselves, they made it their mission to help whoever was around them, and they visited, the better parts of the world with these Vimanas. And of course, there are other stories of high-speed craft that I'm going to refer to later. Again, here's another painting, and there's thousands of these references of flying machines in ancient India and other cultures of the world. In ancient India, there's a story that 3 cities were orbiting the Earth, and they all got destroyed in an epic battle that took place between gods and men, or as I would like to call it, between gods and gods, all lowercase g, by the way. Let me take this, away from the very beginning here. When I talk about gods, it's all lowercase g. It has nothing to do with the divine, with the spiritual. Those were all misinterpreted flesh and blood extraterrestrials that our ancestors thought were divine in nature, not because they were dumb, but because their technological frame of reference was different than what we have today. Another key phrase is misunderstood technology. So, like I was saying, you saw in the previous slide, this one right here, these houses up in the sky and floating around, and that was India. And this here, for example, is Central America. This one here is China. So all over the world, you have these beings that descended in heavenly chariots and taught mankind in various disciplines, like I was saying before, what we would do on another planet. We would teach them in mathematics, in engineering, in agriculture, all these different things, providing they need our help. If they're as advanced as we are, we would move on to the next step of, exchange of information, exchange of knowledge. And if they're more advanced than us, well, then, hey, can you give us some tips? Absolutely. So here are some quick slides. I'm just going to show you about the whole misunderstood technology aspect. This one here is South America. This here is Japan, the Dogu statues. If you look at this from a modern day perspective, what did the human artist try to depict here? or tried to sculpt? Was it really something that the night before he got drunk and he was on drugs, smoking all the weed that he could smoke, and then he came up with something like this? I say no. I mean, of course, our ancestors, they celebrated with alcohol and they took copious amounts of drugs. However, in order to come up with something like this, or with something like that, where you have a human face behind this mask, and there's a cable or a pipe that goes to some sort of a tank, and you have some fire breath right here, and here you have some weird device that they're carrying around. Here's a close-up, also same here, and you have all this really space-age, modern-looking, garments. Then my question is, was it really just a figment of their imagination, or did they see something and it freaked them out so much because it was something foreign, something novel, that they had to put it, in a sculpture for future generations to see? And that's exactly it, because all these monuments are very ancient, and it takes a lot of time to make all these things. So if it hadn't been important, then there's no way that our ancestors would have put in the time and effort to create all of these things. Here, see, this guy's manipulating some controls here on his chest thing. These two items were actually shown in Ancient Aliens. And, I mean, the mainstream archaeologists actually say, when I ask them, or any of you say, well, what is this? Oh, this is a deity. It's it's a depiction of the gods. And then they walk away and they say, case closed, mystery solved. Well, no, this is where the questions begin. What gods? What did they try to depict here? Where did these gods come from? Again, lowercase g. So, here we have another one. I mean, very similar to a modern day astronaut. I mean, it's uncanny. It's the logo for Legendary Times magazine. Here, this guy has some wings. He wears a skull cap like Apollo astronauts upon liftoff. Boots, some suit. There's some pipes coming out of his chest, and again, some type of a pack that is on his chest. And, if some say that, those were just the only examples that I could find, well, there's more. Here we are in Tikal, Tikal, Guatemala, and this is a stele that was found recently, 100 years ago, and you have this guy that wears mittens, some type of gloves, and very technological, mechanical-looking type of suit with these wrist bands here, or whatever have you. And many people ask me, what is this? And it's basically this pipe, this cord that goes into a tank. Again, down here, he's wearing some type of a suit. And look at these futuristic-looking type of boots here. I mean, to any human who has never seen an Apollo astronaut or a space shuttle astronaut, coming out of the holding area before they board the bus to be driven to the space shuttle, I mean, that must be amazing let's remember how we were as kids when we saw astronauts. It was the best thing on the planet. It was absolutely exciting. And so this thing right here, in fact, I have a clip right here. This is the original. Archaeologists say that this thing in the middle that looks like some sort of a tube that goes to a canister is the spine of that, whatever is depicted on here. Now, if you have a spine like this, and am I on camera? Where am I, by the way? I gotta move over this so everyone can see. So if you have a spine like they claim this is, then you would have to walk like this. I mean, because the spine is curved, it goes, it's absolutely ridiculous to have a suggestion like that. Here is the Hindu god Ganesha, which is always depicted as an elephant. Today, and over the last 500 years, Ganesha was depicted as an elephant, but this is one of the earliest representations that we have of Ganesha. Does this look like a trunk to you? It looks more or less like some type of, again, some sort of tubing. It goes to a canister. And again, Ganesha, according to the Hindu traditions, has arrived from outer space, from the endlessness of the dark nothing. I mean, that's just an old old saying for deep space. This is a depiction of that can be found at a monastery in Yugoslavia.
In Kosovo.
Thank you very much. Does it still exist, by the way?
Yes, it does.
Wonderful.
It does.
Did they protect it?
Yes, it is.
Good. Excellent.
It's a UNESCO case.
And here is something that I'm very fond of, because this is an object that was found in Colombia. It's about 1,500 years old or older. And there's many of these that were found. And archaeologists say that this is nothing more but a stylized fish or a stylized insect. And these are all the ones that have been found, including the one here with the propeller. I mean, these are all ancient. Now, does any of these look like a mosquito or a fish to you? Please.
You can find these in various locations throughout.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, and all throughout Colombia. And so Dr. Ingboom and Peter Belting, he is an Air Force controller in Germany, and Dr. Ingboom is a dentist, doctor. So both these people have very sound minds. They're not, out there, so to speak, even though what defines out there anyway? So they actually recreated this model right here. I mean, this is a replica right here that has been taken off the mold. It's at the Smithsonian right now. There's literally hundreds that have been found, but only these here look like actual aircraft. All the other ones do look like frogs, do look like birds and fish and so on and so forth, but the fact that there's others like this means that these have to be viewed from a separate perspective than the other ones. Because if I may go back to point out one more thing. In nature, birds don't have an upright tail fin, they don't have stabilizers, and most importantly, see, where birds and also any flying animals have their wings is where we have our shoulders, okay? Well, this here, doesn't come out, where your shoulders are, especially, these things right here. I mean, this is a complete delta wing right here. And some have, or this one over there, some have suggested it's a stingray and things like this. And, it's all conceivable, but, if something smacks you in the eye, don't fight it. So, here, actually, Eric talked about this earlier. This has been found at the Istanbul Museum, and so because Eric talked about it a few minutes ago, I'm not going to repeat anything about this, but it's uncanny, the exhaust back here, some sort of a headless spaceman sitting inside a capsule. And one of my favorite topics, Palenque in Bolivia. If you have nothing to do this summer, go there, or actually go in this coming winter, because if you go this summer, it's summer here and winter there. So just wait till winter here, so it's summer there. Palenque, 14,000 feet altitude, right next to Lake Titicaca, next to Tiwanaku, which is a tourist site in South America where literally dozens and dozens of tourists every year come and they photograph the gate of the moon and the gate of the sun, and then they go home or go back to La Paz and they're nothing the wiser. However, only 150 yards away is this, Palenque. And you have all these gigantic stone slabs that at one point all fit together. However, even the natives say that when they came onto the scene, this place was already in ruins. Mainstream archaeology says that all of this was built by the Aymara Indians. And I think we'd all agree in here that if you would build something like this, you need planning, because each piece goes somewhere, and they're like Legos. I mean, they all fit together, and you know, you have to have some sort of a planning idea of blueprint of where goes what, and so on and so forth. Now, the Aymara, the mainstream archaeologists agree on one very crucial point, that the Aymara have no writing. They didn't have a script. So archaeology also proposes, in order to build something like this, you need writing. So they're refuting their argument, their own argument. And the heirs of the Aymara still live in this neighborhood. So when you, and they're very proud of their traditions, they're very proud of their history. If you ask them, hey, who built this? Was it you? No, senor. Wasn't me, or wasn't us. So who did it? Los dioses, and they will point to the sky, the gods. So what we have here is living mythology, where just like with Native American myth, which we'll get into later, you still have oral traditions that have survived hundreds and thousands of years. And they all maintain the one thing, that a long, long time ago, the quote-unquote heavens opened, and the gods descended from the sky, the teachers of the sky, or the guardians of heaven, and they taught mankind. So going back to this whole Puma Punko and Lego thing, these pieces right here are all in a row, and about 9 of them have been found. And years ago, we went up there and we took concise measurements to see, you know, what would happen if we were to create a computer model with this. And to make a long story short, by the way, this is the back, these T-shapes and crosses in the back. They actually fit together like Legos, creating an impenetrable wall. And anyone who has seen Ancient Aliens a few weeks ago, they created this really awesome animation of all these pieces fitting together and creating this wall. Look at the intricacy of the cutting techniques. Talking about the cutting techniques, all these stones up there are made of granite, andesite, and diorite. The only stone harder than those 3 I just mentioned is diamond. So the tools, the inescapable conclusion is that the tools must have been diamond tipped. And mainstream archaeology tells us, oh no, this was all carved with chicken bones and with obsidian.
Some archaeologists.
Many, not some. It is not some, I can tell you that. But you're right, you're right. I mean, there is a paradigm shift happening, even among academia, which is great. So, oh, and of course, how were all of these big, gigantic blocks transported? Mainstream archaeology. Oh, before I move on, just to show you how intricate the cutting techniques are, and that all of this had to do something with some sort of a technical nature. Look at this fine line.
Chicken bone.
Yes. I mean, what is this? It seems as if this is the female part to a male part that's missing somewhere. And this looks very much like, you know, some electronic stuff that we have today where you hide your cables or something like this. So, by the way, if you were to go there and run your thumb down this groove, you would cut yourself. That is how perfect it is. It looks very coarse, but that's because of years of weathering. The actual surface, when you go touch this, it's like a bathroom mirror, which means that the stone might have been vitrified, and you only achieve vitrification if you apply, or I mean, if you expose the stone to extreme heat. I mean, it's like, you know, really incredible. to return to the point I was making before about, how were these big platforms transported, the mundane and common answer by archaeologists is the wooden roller theory. Everything was done with wooden rollers. Let me remind you, we're at 14,000 feet, which is above the natural tree line. No trees grow at 14,000 feet. They never did. So they never had any wooden rollers. And this is a big plateau where if they would have imported wooden rollers, it would have been at least 800 miles to import those wooden rollers. And there is no record of it, not even in the oral traditions, that anything like this ever happened. And like I said, archaeology's answers are pretty mundane, but sometimes mundane does not make sense. So here we are in Egypt, and here, the flying barges is a very incredible motif all over Egypt. By the way, you have the same thing in Native American petroglyphs, where you have this half a shield or a wave like this, or a crescent moon, I should say, and with a person inside. And the legends behind these behind these ships is that these were the heavenly barges with which the gods, arrived and left back to the kingdom of the gods in outer space. And in ancient American myth, you have the exact same thing, where you have a crescent form and an arrow underneath it. And in any Native American petroglyph, anything that has an arrow to it, in most of the cases, and archaeologists actually agree on this one, it signifies flight, very fast flight. So if you have this crescent-shaped form with a person standing or sitting in it, and underneath it you have an arrow, that means that this thing was flying. And also in ancient American, in Native American mythology, we have references to flying shields. We have references to these flying pumpkin halves. So we're going to get more into it later. This here is a megalithic site at the Osirion in Egypt. And it's absolutely massive. This doorway, a person would come to about here. So just look at the difference in size of these blocks right here. Now, notice the construction up here with the smaller stones and the massive megalithic stones at the bottom. The stones that were used down here, or the construction down here, that is the original construction. Everything else that is above came later. Which construction is more sophisticated? The more ancient one. Down here, I will give everyone $10 if you can put a dollar bill in between the fittings right here. It's impossible. And there was no mortar used. So this is absolute perfection in masonry. And by the way, similar stone walls can be found in South America, in Peru, and also on Easter Island. So, I mean, it's absolutely fascinating how this was done. And this Osirion, by the way, has access points, and this was just recently discovered, that it's a shaft that goes straight down. And we've made a diagram, and there's actually 3 stories with a sarcophagus that's underwater right now. The sarcophagus, by the way, is empty. And from here to here, we're talking about 40 yards. So it is deep, deep, deep in the bedrock. There's also a hall that has been discovered. This is not the Hall of Records. that's allegedly underneath the Sphinx. This is something else that has been discovered. This here is a capstone that is different from the surrounding stones or the surrounding bedrock, and the access point to this chamber is smaller. Picture this, is smaller than the capstone. Physically, that is impossible, because you can't get a stone in there from a different quarry through an entrance that's smaller than the actual capstone. So, you know, I don't even want to, you know, hypothesize, because, to be honest with you, anything will sound ridiculous. So I'm not even going to go there. I'm just showing the evidence that it exists. By the way, this here is the Wall of Crows, also in Egypt. So here is a person. There's more of these stones as big as little, you know, railway cars. This is one of a sarcophagus that was found at the Serapeum in Saqqara. This here is a person. I mean, let this picture sink in. Again, the access points to these chambers are smaller than this whole thing. Something does not make sense. And here's the physical evidence. Now, what is it? Technology. This was not done with, in my opinion, with mind control. I mean, this had to do, you know, someone has the technology to literally move this stuff or beam it in or whatever. But in my firm opinion, it is something it has something to do with technology. Oh, here we are, Native American myth. Anywhere you go, and like I said, I just returned from Arizona. Any souvenir shop you go to, you have these dolls that you can buy. They're called kachinas. And the kachinas are often referred to as the all-knowing ones. Or, if you ask the elders, the shamans in Native American tribes, they're also referred to as the star people. So everywhere you have, in Native American myth, you have these legends and myths of these kachinas that a long, long time ago descended from the sky and literally created mankind. So, according to Native American myth, there were 4 worlds. The first world, there was absolutely nothing. And then the creator world, the creator God arrived, and he started to create the beings for the first world, which were all, you know, insect-looking like creatures. And then he says, this is pretty boring. So he created the second world and the third world, and each time the creatures were improved. And in the fourth world, he created us. I mean, this is all myth and mythology, legends. I am not saying that that's how it was. What I'm saying is that we should look at this from a modern day perspective and ask, what is it that these ancient legends and myths are trying to tell us? Because whenever these kachinas arrive, they're also responsible for teaching us in all sorts of courses or artifacts. Here's another one. I mean, they all look very, space age-like, like astronauts that our ancestors encountered and they didn't quite understand what was going on. And according to Native American myth, this planet was seeded by these star people. I mean, am I to argue with them? No, because again, what we have here is living mythology. We also have living mythology in South America, in Brazil, in the Amazon. This is the Kiowa Tribe. And every 5 years, they have a celebration where they celebrate the originator or the creator god of the whole Amazon region, the culture bringer, whose name was Bekoroti. And he has this weird staff with which he was able to destroy trees and frighten the people. And what's really interesting is that the first day that he arrived, he was just, you know, sort of walking around, and the people were very frightened. So they started to taunt him, and they shot arrows at him, and they tried to fight him. But whatever suit he was wearing, you know, was indestructible. And so in order to frighten them, he used his magic staff, and he shot a tree, exploded, went up in flames, and, you know, it befuddled the entire, you know, native population there. And so it took them a few days for them to come back out of their huts and, you know, understand that he still is friendly. But what's interesting is that in the first couple of weeks, and they're very specific about their mythology or about this story, the first couple of weeks, he did not talk to them at all. He was just laughing with them, and when they were dancing, he was dancing with them, and he was always laughing. Very jovial kind of guy. But in the third week, he all of a sudden spoke their language. And he started to create a school and started to teach them about where he came from. He drew them a map to show a star system that has been confirmed today. And the question is, well, what was going on here? Well, any ethnologist that encounters a tribe somewhere in the jungle, there's no way we can communicate with them right away. It will take us at least 3 weeks to even rudimentarily start to communicate with them. So to say, I mean, one of the biggest arguments was always, well, how come these ancient astronauts, they spoke English? Or they spoke so-and-so, and they spoke so-and-so. You know, turn on your brain. Any ethnologist does it today. We go somewhere in the jungle and we encounter, or anywhere. I mean, how many of you have gone, you know, to a different country to learn a different language, or have done the Berlitz or the Pimsleur course? Wow, did I just violate some, you know, internet advertising thing? So, anyway, so that's exactly what happened a long, long time ago. Now, moving on. So here you have another example of, you know, what these things might have looked like comparison to today. We are going to Palenque, and I'm going to speed this up a little bit. So I'm just going to show you that underneath this pyramid, which has been built afterwards, there is a tomb. It's a tomb of Pakal, and in there, they actually found this slab. And mainstream archaeologist says, oh, this is nothing else but Pakal as he is being swallowed by the underground monster. And out of his chest grows a tree of the tree of the cross of life. And this here, you know, is the tail of a rattler, and all sorts of bizarre stuff. Now, to me, this guy sits inside some sort of a capsule, manipulating some controls. There's some thing coming out, you know, in front of his nose. Down here you have some sort of an exhaust. His foot rests on a pedal, and he's looking through some sort of a device. I am not saying that extraterrestrials built this. I'm saying humans carved this because they saw something that freaked them out so much, or not freaked them out necessarily, but was so significant to them that they took the time and effort to rebuild or recreate something for future generations to see. And, you know, the whole idea about, you know, the cross of life, what is a cross of life? I mean, what is the origin behind the cross of life? Well, any mainstream archaeologist will tell you that the origin of the cross of life has something to do with the gods. So we're back to square one. And therefore, we always have to ask the question, well, who were these gods? What the heck are our ancients talking about? And, many times I'm told, oh, you're looking at this from a wrong perspective. You've got to look at it from this end. And I say, okay. And see, in the ancient astronaut theory, the great thing is that we're never confined by just one field of study. Our field of study can go in every direction. We can look at different cultures, different time periods, and different myths. And when I see the Palenque slab vertically like this, then I look at this part right here, that's sort of bell-shaped, and I go on the other side of the world, and we are in Indonesia, Borobudur, and you have these stupas. A stupa is, according to Hindu mythology, a chariot of the gods, or a vehicle with which to reach the realm of the gods. And since the ancient astronaut theory attempts to emphasize the technological nature of all these ancient stories, it's an idea what these stupas might have achieved. They were the vehicles with which the gods arrived and with which the gods left. Now, inside each stupa is a Buddha. I am not saying that the Buddha was an extraterrestrial. I am not saying that Jesus was an extraterrestrial. They were not. So, this is just, human artists trying to make sense of something that they saw. So again, Buddha sitting inside these stupas, or vimanas. Stupa is another word for vimana, or vimana is another word for stupa, and as we've established earlier on, it's a vehicle with which to reach the realm of the gods. It's manipulating some controls again, and so you have basically the whole outline. And the question is, could it be that our ancestors saw something like this? They tried to make sense of it. So my question to you is, what did our ancestors see? What does the Old Testament in the Bible describe? Is it really God? No.
I'll take care of it.
Where was described in the Old Testament, for example, was an extraterrestrial that our ancestors misinterpreted as God. Now, I want to go on record to say that I am a deep believer in God, but my idea of God is not what is described in the Old Testament, for example, or the Western idea of God. So, I don't believe in aliens. I do not worship them. No one should. Has nothing to do with belief. This is just, a great research topic to follow. But it opens your eyes, because what it basically explains is that the ancient astronauts were the creators or the root cause for all of today's organized religions. And we have to look beyond what it really means to be spiritual, and that all the tools in order to have a connection with the universe are all in here. It's not in a book, it's not in a church, it's not in a temple, it's right here. I mean, right now I'm in church. This is awesome. All your energy, the love, the vibration, this is what it's all about. Not, and then, you go to church and the moment you walk out, did you see what he was wearing? How could he do that? No, I mean, so, thank you very much. I mean, this was a fast, quick thing.
Yeah, so anybody ever, the jungle environment you can support very small populations, yet massive constructions were made, obviously, by large populations. So I think it's bad. Who was the support teams? Where was all that going on?
Well, yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. The question was, how were the our ancestors fed? Because they obviously were in great numbers and they had to build all this stuff. And the answer to that is, you know, number one, it took much longer than what we're told today, over many generations. And number two, you know, the classic ancient astronaut theory does not postulate that the pyramids at Giza, for example, were built by aliens. In fact, even the ancient texts, we can read how the pyramids were built. And it says that the pyramids were built by human hands, but with the assistance of the gods. So there is an idea that maybe, you know, see, that's a long answer, and I'll talk to you afterwards, but the thing is that there is evidence that food processing machines did exist in ancient times. So, may I answer a few of the web questions?
Yeah, here's a good one. Any ancient astronaut discoveries in China?
Of course. In fact, one of the earlier slides showed these frescoes and paintings of you know, flying chariots. And the quick answer to that is that ancient Chinese mythology is filled with fire-spewing dragons. Now, looking at that from a modern-day perspective, were they really dragons, or were they misinterpreted, you know, biological creatures, but they were actual, you know, machines with which the gods arrived? And by the way, same thing goes with the thunderbird in Native American legends. That the thunderbird, out of which the Kachinas emerged, that the thunderbird wasn't an actual bird, biological bird, but it was some type of a flying machine that has been misinterpreted as something divine or spiritual in nature. Another question from the web. I gotta, you know, the web audience. Let's give them a hand, actually. Come on. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, I mean, it's science fiction.
Do you think any DNA has been left behind of aliens by in any of these tombs or any of these other sites?
Okay, the question is whether or not any DNA has been left over by these aliens. And the answer is yes, and that DNA is not in any tomb. It's not in any, you know, sort of artifact. It's right inside of us. We are their offspring. We are the children of the gods. You know, the question that I get asked by the critics is always, well, you know, the aliens, they could never look like us. I mean, how is that even possible? Well, it's very possible, because according to the ancient texts, we were created in their image and not the other way around. So the question we should ask is not, what do the aliens look like us? But do we look like the aliens? Because, you know, it's clear. I mean, the thing is that you can't have a functioning, intelligent being with eyes where the feet are. You can't have an intelligent being without some type of hands or tentacles with which to push buttons or grab something. I mean, from an evolutionary perspective, it's impossible, you know, unless, you know, a blob has such mental capacities that, you know, buttons are no longer necessary. But see, all this stuff is too far out there. I'd like to talk about stuff that I can relate to. I can relate to technology, I can relate to logic, something that I'm familiar with, even though I look at it from a, you know, modern day, outside the box perspective. But it's about time that we, you know, connect the past with the future. One more question, or two. And then also one more question from the audience. We can cut into the
Do you believe in that? Do you believe in anything around 2012, like a return?
Well, yes and no. Look, here's the problem, that nobody talks about when the calendar actually started, and that's August 11th, 3114 BC. So